You can't change China, we can't change China. We can't change America. Frankly, even the Chinese can't change China. The Americans will side one against the other, support them, arm them, take sides. China look at them and say, look, all the best to you. 800 military bases in the world. Who's paying for them? We are paying for them because we use the US dollar. It's a little tax on everybody in the world. It's like Taiwan. Taiwan can't determine US-China relations. But Taiwan can decide, does it offer itself to be used by the US?
喺睇片之前，大家記得分享、讚好同訂閱卓見名家，最緊要撳埋呢個鐘仔，咁你就唔會錯過我哋嘅最新影片。
As city-states, for Hong Kong as a special administrative region and Singapore as a city-state, we are price takers in the world. You can't change China, we can't change China. We can't change America. Frankly, even the Chinese can't change China. Mao Zedong, before he died, looking back, he said, well, I've changed a few things around in my neighborhood of Zhongnanhai. But there is a persistence in Chinese culture, which is precisely the reason for its endurance. It is a homogeneous people. Last month, my wife and I took a fast train from Chengdu to Beijing. 7.5 hours, almost 2,000 kilometers. Chengdu, Xi'an, 洛阳、郑州、石家庄、北京西站。Vast distance, but Chinese. An equivalent distance anywhere else in the world, except in North America, you would have crossed different cultures, different architecture, different cuisines. And China is much bigger than that. The Chinese people they don't really like foreigners. Because foreigners are hard to govern. They don't mind foreigners like garnish on the dish, a sprinkling here and there, that's okay. But the main dish, they prefer it to be Chinese. And that's why, despite a vast population, it's 93% Han. This is not accidental. This is deep instinct. With Confucius, you can govern the Chinese people. They know what to do. They may complain, they may be cynical, they may grumble, but in the end they'll comply. Because they know the alternative is often catastrophic. Not just for you, but for generations. And they also know that however inefficient, however degraded, everyone is better off when the country is not in chaos. And this is the reason for the long cycles of Chinese history. We may say the population of India is greater than China, but India is not China. Each has its own strength and weakness. China is homogeneous in a way which no other ethnic group in the world is by a long stretch. And a written script which codifies meaning because it separates it from the sound. So if you spend an afternoon studying classical Chinese, you can read Luni in its original and interpret it. You can't do that with ancient texts in other civilizations. So I describe China as a computational system which can organize more human beings than any other group on earth. So when it is efficient, it is astonishingly efficient. I was listening to the long, languid conversation between Joe Rogan and Elon Musk the other night. It's worth watching. It's 2.5 hours, a bit long. Treat it as a movie. There's Elon Musk puffing on his cigar, drinking whiskey. Then halfway through, they felt hungry. They ordered a pizza, pineapples with anchovies. And then Elon Musk talked about his Cybertruck, which has a remarkable acceleration. And more interestingly, you can unleash a Tommy gun on it, and the bullets will just fly off, ricochet off. Joe Rogan said, what if I fire my crossbow with a hard tip at it? So Elon Musk will try. So they adjourned to the garage. He picked up his crossbow, he fired, very hard hit, hardly a scratch, the head was dented. Elon Musk said, actually, design is not that difficult. What is more difficult is manufacturing. He repeated this many times. He said manufacturing is 10 times more difficult than design. He did not mention China, but I knew he was making a case because the meeting between Xi Jinping and Biden were coming up. And he has a strong vested interest in getting relationship back on track. You can have the brightest minds in America and the most exciting ideas coming out from Silicon Valley. But without Chinese manufacturing, you can't mass produce these products and make them household items. This is China. When it works, it is awesome. But when it goes awry, it's equally awesome, which explains the long cycles of Chinese civilization. And if you're born in the wrong time, that's just a bad luck. My parents were fortunate enough to pass away knowing that China was rising. That gave them great hope. They married in China in 1937 when my grandfather died, and under local Chu Zhao custom, you must marry within 100 days or else you wait 3 years. A month later, the Gou Qiao incident happened. They rushed back to the Nanyang. My mother could not go back to 1978. When I visited Chaoshan a few days ago, they brought me to Shantou a few days ago. They brought me to a museum of remittances. They have an archive showing all the remittances. This is the Chaozhou network. There are others for the Fujian people and the Cantonese people. From Bangkok, from Indonesia, from Malaysia, from Singapore. Carefully written, a financial system which is not backed by litigation, but by trust. You break that trust, your entire family is blackballed. No one will ever deal with you ever again. China is a big drama. But even at its zenith under Tang Dynasty, it never dominated the world. China can't dominate the world. And China has no wish to dominate the world, because if you dominate the world, then the Han people, instead of 90%, will become 50% or 30%, and China becomes ungovernable. So if you compare, say, the way the Americans deal with the Middle East and the way the Chinese deal with the Middle East, the Americans will side one against the other, support them, arm them, take sides. China look at them and say, look, all the best to you. So they keep things with everybody, with Iran, with Saudi Arabia, with Israel, with the Palestinians. On Gaza, the Israeli ambassador in the UN, a feisty character, criticized China. The Chinese PR looked back at him and say, 我们不是你的对手. We are not your opponent. And stated carefully China's position. And said in the end, without a two-state solution, you have no long-term security. That position China continues to take, and it's the only long-term position for China to take. It does the same with the Ukraine. This world that we live in, the certainties that we seem to enjoy, has specific historical origins. No, before the Second World War ended, Roosevelt sailed across the Atlantic, into the Mediterranean, into the Black Sea, met Churchill and Stalin in Yalta. They drew lines on scraps of paper and divided up the post-war World War II war. On the way out, on board a US cruiser, the Quincy, Roosevelt stopped in the Suez Canal, 5 days talking to Abdul Aziz. Abdul Aziz is the grandfather of MBS. All the kings of Saudi Arabia we're familiar with were the sons of Abdul Aziz. Out of that conversation, a few months before he died with Roosevelt, arose a critical agreement that in return for the US protecting the kingdom of Saudi Arabia, oil would be denominated in US dollars. And that anchored the US dollar and its dominance in the world. Now the grandson is changing it. He has joined BRICS. I don't think he loves America. But he will work with America. He's a very intelligent man. After 1956, the British left. The Americans took over the role of protecting all the Gulf states. And that's why they established Diego Garcia. It's a very secretive base. But without military might, you cannot maintain global order. 800 military bases in the world. Each is horrendously expensive to maintain. Some years ago, the US ambassador in Singapore invited me and my kids to visit the USS Kitty Hawk aircraft carrier. Not the best aircraft carriers, but one of the middling ones. So before going up, I saw someone delivering eggs. I said, how many eggs? He said, 2 million eggs. I said, he must have got a zero wrong because the Chinese confuse E with Qian or one, all that, you know. So I think he must have gotten it wrong. I thought about it. 5,000 sailors, average age 20, 21, 100 days at sea, 4 eggs a day. Yeah, that's 2 million eggs. And they're just eggs. You think about butter, milk, meat, everything. Ammunition, bunker. 800 military bases in the world. Who's paying for them? We are paying for them because we use the US dollar. It's a little tax on everybody in the world. And the US military is like a public good, keeping the peace in the world. But in recent years, it's clear that it's not a public good. It's a private good, and increasingly being weaponized. So this great flywheel, where the US military bases create a Pax Americana, which allows for the position of US dollar and the rise of seigniorage, all this one day will come to a stop, and the flywheel will turn the other way. And if the US cannot sustain this, the implications are more severe than the fall of Western Rome or the end of the Ottoman Empire or the decline of the Qing dynasty. Every part of the world will be affected. So this is some of the ideas that I reflect upon in musings, scattered in different parts of the book. But we are living in very interesting times, not just geopolitically, but underlying it, driving it, technological revolution, which creates new stresses in human society. Thank you.
If you enjoyed this video, we invite you to extend your support by subscribing to the Master Insight channel so that you will never miss any future videos.
This is a perplexing time in world affairs, as economic disparities within and between countries have given rise to anti-globalization movement. On top of that, even 2 wars are still going on. But I think that no one will be so naive to think this kind of devastating conflict will only impact and remain in these regions. Here's my question. What have gone wrong with the world? What's the biggest reason behind all these atrocities, tensions?
I don't think the world is going wrong. I think the world is in a great transition from a US-dominated world, from a Western-dominated world, into a multipolar world. And what we are seeing now, whether it is US-China relations, the Ukraine war, Gaza, West Africa, India, I think are birth pangs of a new world emerging. the full shape of which is not clear, but the rough shape of which can already be discerned. And it's fueled fundamentally by the technological revolution, which has sped up the transmission of knowledge so that societies which were once left behind are able to pole vault ahead very quickly and catch up with, as it were, the former masters. This is what we are seeing. We are in transition. And it is not a little unlike sailing down a river and you see the river accelerating and turning white. And if you have a drone, you can see further, you can say, oh, it will slow down again. So maybe you can't change the river, but I can decide which part of the river I'm in so that I avoid the whirlpools and I turn the corner more easily and get into placid waters. But if you don't have a drone and you depend only on your eyes and you can't see around the corner, you may end up being in the wrong spot and crash into rocks. So the importance of sensing technology and sensing historical forces at work is extremely important, especially for small jurisdictions like us in Hong Kong and Singapore. We can't change the world, but we can position ourselves in that world. It's like Taiwan. Taiwan can't determine US-China relations. But Taiwan can decide, does it offer itself to be used by the US in the event that the US wants war with China? Taiwan can say, no, I don't want to, don't involve me. This is not my problem. And the US will not be able to use Taiwan. But if Taiwan says, yes, I want to be used because maybe the US can so devastate China, China in chaos, suddenly the Red Sea opens, and I make a dash to the other side. Which was what Lee Teng-Hui said when he, in his interview to Ryotaro Shiba, that he wants to take his people out of Egypt. But you need the Red Sea to open. But if you base your policy on a wish, or build your hopes on an illusion, then it can lead to tragedy.
中意名家分析，記得俾 like 同埋分享，支持同訂閱卓見名家，最緊要撳埋呢個鐘仔，咁就唔會錯過我哋嘅新片。